At first we looked at Merlin, next we looked at King Arthur, now we look at the Knights of the Round Table. We will be going over all of them, in I guess alphabetical order because that's the only order that works for me. By the end of this video I will have told you about every major Knight of the Round Table that has feats and things to talk about, and equipment and abilities, and then I will be giving the most consistent ranking that I can for them and putting them in their tiers, which honestly it's just that those are who are around King Arthur's strength and those who aren't, so there's like 2 tiers, so that's not really that important. Once again, I'll reiterate like the last 2 videos, I've looked over every single Arthurian related work in the matter of Britain that I could get my hands on between Arthur's first appearance to the 16th century at the end of the medieval era. The most important pieces I couldn't get my hands on are the Vulgate and post-Vulgate cycles, but I believe there's enough here to be able to make a decently lengthy video anyway. This is probably going to be the longest one. When it comes to scaling in terms of physical stats, I'd highly recommend going back to watch the King Arthur video where I laid out the calcs and stats for these tiers. For this, I'll be going over individual feats, but not specific numbers because I don't want to get repetitive. Place your bets on what ranking you think the top few knights will get as we begin with a question on how many knights there are. Yeah, I bet you didn't think that was a big question, but it really is. The amount of actual Knights of the Round Table is not consistent at all, like something like the 12 Paladins or Charlemagne or anything. So I'll go from the smallest to biggest attestations I could find. Now, to anyone who doesn't know, the Round Table is the seating of chairs at King Arthur's court where the highest and greatest knights would sit, a place where they wouldn't boast of each other's superiority to one another, for they have all equally earned the highest honour of being seated at the Round Table. The Round Table itself is, well, a round table, constructed on the advice of Merlin by Merlin. It signifies the round world and the canopy of the planets, as well as the elements of the firmament from which you can see the stars. It essentially represents the entire world itself, and that no matter where you're from or what your origin is, you can earn a seat at the Round Table if you earn it. As for the number, I actually only found a few mentions of any specific numbers, but counted up I believe most stories would have between 20 to even 50 knights that have sat at the Round Table through the history of its existence. But the actual numbers we begin with the prosaic Tristan, where we got the smallest number of 12, one for each of the 13 apostles, with the 13th chair never sat in because it represents Judas Iscariot who betrayed Christ. I actually should have mentioned this in the Merlin video, but I forgot. The perilous seat here is mentioned as dropping those who sit on it into all-consuming flames, so that's something Merlin can do, and backs up his ability to manipulate fire. Le Morte d'Arthur makes a claim that actually the table was owned by Uther and given to King Leodegrance, who then gave it to Arthur, or I don't remember if he gave it, but Arthur got it later. It is telling it can hold 150 knights, and similarly, in one of the only pieces of the Vulgate cycle I could find, the Grail quest, it is stated that there are 150 knights at the Round Table by the time of Sir Galahad's arrival prior to the Grail quest. Perlisvaus, which I mistakenly think I called Perlisavus last time, which is not the right name, actually goes with the biggest number I found, claiming that there are 366 knights of the Round Table. Of course, if I counted every single knight that I saw mentioned, it might actually reach that point, but I didn't, because there's so many, and I won't mention every single knight for this video because that'd just be too much. So yeah, between 12 to 366. But I think 150 is a pretty good middle ground to keep, because it's almost literally between the high and the low. But it doesn't really matter, to be honest, so let's just get started with our knights in alphabetical order. Order. Sir Bedivere. Sir Bedivere, along with Sir Kay, is one of the oldest knights of the Round Table, but one that sadly has shockingly little going on in the stories. Also known by the name Bedwyr Bedredant, Bedivere is one of Arthur's most trusted and longest standing allies, and typically plays the role of just sort of being there until Arthur dies and he has to throw a sword into a pond. Bedivere, however, is noted for having only one arm, sometimes the depictions vary, and yet despite that, a single swing from Bedivere is equal to 600 knights. And he is also faster than 3 men on the battlefield, more than fast enough to catch a giant spear thrown at someone next to him and then throw it back. On his own, Bedivere was able to kill 100 knights, and his only known weapon of significance is a spear. This spear has the ability to have its head come away, draw blood from the wind, and return again. Whatever that means, I can only read this as meaning Bedivere's spear can shoot its tip at people, and then the tip will return. So its head comes away, it draws blood from the wind, as in it cuts someone at a distance, and then it returns back to the spear. But that's not as peculiar as this ability also attested to in Coolwich and Olwen, when 1 wound would be delivered from the spear, 9 counter thrusts there would be. Maybe this is saying that when Bedivere stabs you with his spear, 9 more blows would be delivered at the same time? So perhaps Bedivere's spear can not only shoot its tip at people, but also hit you 10 times with a single blow. Who knows, it's actually very awkwardly written. But that's actually all there is to say with Bedivere in terms of feats and abilities and weapons. When it comes to scaling, I'd be willing to say Bedivere scales just below the Welsh version of Sir Kay, as they're considered to be very close to each other, but I'd still rank him below Arthur. Any other version of Bedivere other than the Welsh one does basically nothing, and all I can do is give you random tidbits about him, so I'll just throw those at you. Bedivere once survived the strongest winds in the world. He doesn't condone simping, but is probably simped at, because the man is like the sexiest motherfucker ever. He's also Arthur's butler, and owes the province of Neustrie, I don't know how it's pronounced, in France. At last, he was buried in Bayeux after his death. Sir Bertelac de Hautezert, also known as Sir Breadbettle and the Green Knight, this is the famous Green Knight who appears in the tale of Gawain and the Green Knight. Sir Bertelac is indeed entirely green, and served Arthur early in his reign as king. He is so strong that he claims no knight on the Round Table could possibly beat him in a fight, and he wields an axe that is fucking just massive. Alongside a sword from Cologne, I hope it's not like, I don't know how that's pronounced, but I'm just assuming it's pronounced like Cologne, and a Milanese knife. His axe is also of Danish origin. Bertelac was magically altered by Morgan, making it so that after being decapitated, he just picked his head back up and put it back where it was, and he was fine. But that's not the craziest supernatural power, because he also has a book. This book he found on the seaside This book he just found on the seaside was literally written by God's own hands and sealed with God's own blood, and with it he was able to take control of a demon and make it his familiar. This demon's name is Burlo Beanie, and he is described as a little monster with 7 heads that shoots fire into the heavens, and is also immune to weapons. What the fuck? Sir Carlisle. Appearing only in the story of Sir Gawain and the Carle of Carlisle, Sir Carlisle is the unnamed Carle of Carlisle, who was cursed so that he would kill anyone who would lodge in his castle, unless they did his every demand, including the likes of sleeping with his own wife and humiliating themselves for him. After Gawain did everything he was asked, the Carle was freed from his curse, and made into a knight by King Arthur. Sir Carlisle is gigantic. His shoulders are 2 yards across, meaning chances are his shoulder width is wider than your height. His thighs are thicker than stone pillars. His finger is as big as a man's entire leg, and he was able to one-shot Sir Kay. And unlike everyone else will see one-shot Sir Kay later, and trust me, it's a lot of them, Sir Kay was actually knocked out cold by Carlisle. He also has 4 pet animals, a boar, a bull, a bear, and a lion who all do his bidding. Unfortunately, he only appears in that one story, and I wish he appeared more because Arthur's Round Table will look so badass with a second giant in it. Sir Cleas. I actually have a very mixed opinion on Cleas. I think that's how it's pronounced, I don't know. Reading his story, I don't like it. There was a marked improvement to Eric and Enide, or Eric and Enid, it might be, but I didn't like Cleas himself. But I also found that whenever he was name dropped as just like one of the knights randomly accompanying Kay or Mordred, I didn't dislike it at all. It felt like ancient medieval fan service. Anyway, Cleas is both perfect, like literally he's described as just the best thing ever, and also the Black Knight. He even rides the horse Moral, who is dressed in all black, but that's all he has on him. Cleas is strong enough to hit a guy so hard that he and his horse as well fall over, and he could turn faster than a top-driven and lashed by the whip again, whatever that means. He's claimed to surpass Sir Tristan in bowmanship, fencing, and dealing with birds and hounds. He took down 6 Saxons, though he did so one at a time, and he gained glory in a tournament wherein he ratioed Lancelot, and also ratioed Percival, but was matched by Sir Gawain. He also killed 500 knights alongside Kay and Clermont. Yeah, that's all. Cleas only really shows up in one story, so yeah. Don't worry, eventually we'll get to knights that have a lot more to talk about. Sir Eric. Oh boy, time to talk about my least favourite knight of the Round Table. Sir Eric of Eric and Enid, and basically no other stories. Sir Eric is everything that people who don't like Lancelot think Lancelot is. In fact, I should mention now that Lancelot is the weakest of the 5 protagonists that his author wrote. Like, Chrétien de Troyes, I don't know how it's pronounced. I don't know how a lot of things are pronounced, shut up. Wrote 5 stories with different protagonists, and Lancelot is the weakest of them, and he made these protagonists, aside from Ywain. Eric is ranked above him, Cleas thrashes him in a fight, Ywain matches Gawain, who is superior to Cleas and Lancelot, like, yeah. Anyway, Sir Eric is basically perfect and amazing. He wins a wife who is so good that she explicitly makes Tristan's wife, whose entire character is that she's beautiful, look ugly. He loved her too hard, people talk shit, and he went on a journey to prove that he was a knight, all the while being the biggest dick. Now the thing with Eric is that he is absolutely perfect, like the man can do no wrong, but he's also a huge asshole who verbally abuses his wife for trying to help him by warning him of threats that he cannot see. And despite being such a cunt to her, she still loves him, and he wins everything and becomes king and everyone worships him and he's got a crown that's way better than Arthur's. I hate Eric so much. Anyway, let's get this over and done with. Feats of strength. Eric smashes a guy hard enough to crack a shield from top to bottom, breaks a guy's armor and kills him. His equipment includes a sword, shield and halberd, and a crown made with carbuncles of which the dimmest stone shines brighter than the moon. Eric is ranked second amongst the round table. He won a tournament with ease. He fought Sir Ywain until evening and beyond, Ywain being strong enough to smash through his shield with his sword. He defeated 3 knights at once, then 5, and a count, and Gwivret. Then he beat Sir Kay, of course. Then he beats 2 giants who are so strong that 4 men to them would be like 1 lamb to 2 wolves, and he did all that without resting. That's it, good job Eric, wow amazing, fuck off. Sir Galahad. Okay, the first of the knights with a lot to talk about is the big one. There's no sugarcoating it. Sir Galahad is the greatest knight of the Round Table, and it isn't even close. That's why last video I said second strongest was more worth discussing, because Galahad is outright the greatest knight of the Round Table, despite only showing up in 3 stories, all of which are the same story written slightly differently. Sir Galahad is the son of Lancelot, born when Lancelot fucked the lady, the daughter of the wounded Fisher King. Galahad is introduced as incredibly handsome, an unparalleled knight that Merlin foresaw would sit on the perilous seat, who wanted to be knighted only by Lancelot, who didn't even know he was his father. He just really liked Lancelot. Galahad is born to the lineage of King David of Israel, and as a result also King Solomon, leading down the line to the Fisher King, his grandfather. In the year 445 AD, he sat on the perilous seat and was proven the most notable and greatest knight there would ever be in doing so. Galahad's presence caused the Holy Grail to appear to the court of King Arthur, wherein, by Gawain's decree and Arthur's regretful agreement, the entire Round Table embarked on the fabled Grail quest. Galahad would go on a journey, completing great deeds and tasks, reunite with his father, whom he stayed with for over a year, meet Percival and Bors, his travelling companions, retrieve legendary artifacts, and eventually acquire the Holy Grail. Upon acquiring it, Galahad became a High King, and after receiving a vision, used the Grail to bring about his own death so that he could ascend into heaven as an angel. With that being said, you might be surprised to know that Galahad doesn't actually have many physical feats of his own. Just that he once sat there, completely unmoving from his saddle as 6 guys were bashing on his shield. In fact, half of them ended up flying off their horses when Galahad didn't budge. But Galahad's accomplishments are not to be scoffed at. Galahad is considered the best knight in the world, and defeated both Lancelot and Percival in short succession. Throughout his journey, he didn't lose a single time, and acquired great weapons, defenses, and showed off his unmatched holiness. Galahad is kind of amusing because throughout Le Morte d'Arthur, he manages to be the biggest humble bragger in the world. The kind of guy who when told something is impossible will offhandedly just say, not really, not for me at least, and then do it. He's so casual about how he's the best just anywhere he is. He knows how good he is, and that makes him surprisingly fun to follow despite being literally perfect, because he's almost a douche, but not quite. But yes, he is genuinely that good, which you can see when we take one look at his equipment. Galahad's first piece of equipment is the Sword of Sir Balin, sometimes called the Adventurous Sword by people. Sir Balin was a knight who lived early in Arthur's kingship. He was met with a sword from a maiden of the Lady of the Lake, one that no knight could draw unless they were completely without villainy, treachery, or treason, and Balin was able to draw this sword. With it, he then killed the Lady of the Lake in a single blow, though in this story there's like multiple Nimues/Vivians, so who cares. After Balin's death, Merlin took the blade and placed it into a stone so that it could drift down a river until it would be drawn by Galahad. The blade is described as rich and fair, with a pommel of precious stone inlaid with letters of gold. The sword reads, "No one shall remove me from here but the one whose side I am destined to hang, and he shall be the best knight in the world." And it's not lying, nobody can wield it but Galahad, as they will suffer a wound from it that they will not recover from. So this is just a weapon for Galahad and once Sir Balin. The sword is so strong that when Sir Balin was wielding it, he was hitting so hard that the strongest giant in the world would have been killed in one hit, and the sword was able to stay intact with withstanding multiple blows of that force on it. But that's only one of his swords, and honestly the less interesting of his 2. His real impressive sword is known as the Sword of Strange Hangings. This sword was the sword of King David, blessed after his death by King Solomon, who sent it out on a boat whereupon his descendant Galahad would one day acquire it. This sword possesses a stone pommel, with stones across it that each represent its own virtue and is each a different colour, and it possesses some fucky abilities. The hilt is made from the bones of two different beasts. One was a Scottish serpent known as the Palamedes, and when gripped it makes it so that the wielder does not need to feel fear or excessive heat, essentially protecting them from intense temperature. The other was a fish called the Ostinax, which makes it so that you will not remember any joy or pain prior to gripping the sword until you put it down. Essentially, if Galahad is injured, he can simply grip the sword and he will no longer feel that pain. These two bones together prevent anyone from wielding the blade unless they surpass all others in skill. It's described that nobody who holds a sword will be weary or hurt, but also nobody can grip it but Galahad. Percival and Bors in fact cannot get a grip on it outright, which is good for them because it has one hell of a protective enchantment. The Sword of Strange Hangings has been previously wielded by knights who were unworthy of it, and they suffered greatly. King Varlain used it in battle, but upon returning it to its scabbard he instantly died. When read by Percival, he found that the sword actually states that it will curse those who wield it, including a knight who tried to use it against a giant, but found it shattered on impact, leading to his death, and a third man who attempted to use it but was impaled through the leg with a sudden lance. However, Galahad does not need to worry about these side effects, because he is the destined wielder. I guess he could give his sword to this opponent and they'd be fucked. I mean, that's something he could do. With this blade, King Varlain killed a man and his horse in a single strike on the man's helmet. And he didn't just kill them, he split the man and his horse to the earth. As in, he split them in half. This blade cannot be taken into any unholy place, and will keep the wielder from being disgraced. As a result, only a virgin daughter of a king and queen can remove the sword from the wielder, and if they ever violate their virginity, they will fucking die. When Galahad reads its side, he finds that it states that Galahad cannot be wounded to death while wielding it, so it also keeps him protected from dying, and at last it is capable of delivering a dolorous stroke similar to Sir Balin. Not only does this put the weapon on par with the Lance of Longinus that delivered the dolorous stroke earlier in Le Morte d'Arthur, but the dolorous stroke the Sword of Strange Hangings can deliver will cause great pestilence and harm across 2 countries. By literally preventing any grass, fruit or corn from growing and preventing the appearance of fish. With one swing, and when I say it can do this, I mean it actually did do it. That did happen. And Galahad could recreate that level of power anytime he wants. It's not even the sword itself that is the only magical thing. It is also carried on a girdle of gold and precious stones, also made with the hair of its creator, Percival's sister, and is within a scabbard known as Memory of Blood, which is made from the Tree of Life and represents the blood of Abel. Neither of these things should be able to carry the sword, by the way, but they do anyway. But not only does he have 2 magical swords, he also has a magical shield. The Red Cross, as I call it, is a shield that brings bad luck to any knight who wields it, who is not the most valiant. Within 3 days, one of its wielders died, doing so by being attacked by a white knight the shield summoned. Yeah, the shield just summons white knights to attack the unworthy. The shield is described as white with a red cross that smells of all the spices in the world, and is the finest and richest of all shields. It was originally owned by Joseph, son of Joseph, and possesses the ability to heal lost limbs. When praying to God, it can grant victory and completely heal a man's severed hand, but that will remove the red cross from the shield, which cannot be replaced but for the blood of a man as holy as Joseph. And also, Galahad has one more weapon, the Holy Lance of Longinus. This isn't specifically mentioned, but when the hand of God arrives to retrieve Galahad, it also retrieves a spear beside him. This is almost certainly the bloody tipped lance that has been accompanying the Holy Grail since the Holy Grail's first mentioned in history in Percival, where it is mentioned as of equal importance to a lance that constantly drips blood from its tip. This lance is mentioned in the prose Tristan as outright being the lance that was used to kill Jesus on the cross. The lance not only was able to completely destroy a castle in one blow during Sir Balin's dolorous stroke, but will also create a wound that will keep bleeding for 50 years once used, and the only person who can heal that wound is Galahad himself. Which he does so with his supernatural holiness. Galahad is the holiest of all knights. He is so holy that he even encountered and defeated the devil himself by just standing there. See, in this tale, the devil was removing senses and memories and taking away bodily powers with his voice, but Galahad was literally so holy that it was not working, and the devil just simply couldn't affect him, because he is void of all mortal sin. It may be blasphemous to say, but Galahad is described in the story as being a knight and servant of God, in the same way as God sent Jesus Christ. So basically, the Vulgate cycle claims that Galahad is the second coming of Christ as a knight. With his holiness, he healed someone who could not move without help, and healed King Mordred of his blindness, paralysis, and made his dead, decaying flesh recover and become young, with his bare hands. He also has made boiling water stop burning by touching it with his hand, and when encountered by an evil fiend, he is described as being seen by the fiend as accompanied by so many angels that the fiend can't do anything. There is a whole host of angels protecting Galahad. Oh, and he can fix a broken sword by just putting the pieces together with his hand. And if you thought that that was as holy and as healing-y as Galahad could get, think again. As I mentioned, Galahad is one of the knights who won the Holy Grail, alongside Bors and Percival, and he kept the Grail up until his death, meaning Galahad should have access to all of the Holy Grail's powers. The Holy Grail has demonstrated the ability to multiply objects, allowing 12 loaves of bread to become enough to feed 4,000 people, and heal deathly wounds. He also did the following in a single scene. It created a thunderstorm, fired a sunbeam 7 times clearer than any that ever saw it, paralyze others and prevent them from talking, become invisible and untouchable, fill a room with good odors, create the meat and drinks people love the most for them to eat, teleport and levitate, and it grants Galahad one request, as well as the ability to choose when he dies. Yes, Galahad can decide when he wants to die, so if you're fighting in post-Grail quest, good luck buddy. God himself decided that only Galahad is allowed to make the choice as to when he dies. And he never made his wish either. His one request, he never really made it. So, he still has that. It goes without saying that I think Galahad is easily the greatest knight of the Round Table. He acquired the Holy Grail and has all of its abilities at his disposal, possesses 2 impossibly strong magical swords only matched by Excalibur, has a magic lance, has a magical shield, and is superior in skill and power to Lancelot, Percival, and Gawain. He is also so holy that nothing impure can affect him, and he can literally undo decaying flesh with his bare hands. No need to dwell on this, it's clear he's the strongest knight. Sir Gareth. Sir Gareth is the youngest of Arthur's nephews, brother to Sir Agravain and Gawain and half-brother to Sir Mordred. He was given the name Beaumains by Sir Kay for his beautiful hands. He came to the court hiding his identity so that he could earn his place as a knight instead of being given it just for his bloodline. And did he earn it? Gareth is so strong that Lancelot considers his blows closer to those of a giant than a man after jousting with him for an hour. And Gareth does that pretty regularly, having fought the Red Knight until noon in Eversong and fighting another knight for 2 hours before that. At Gareth's beck and call he has the Green Knight, not Bertilac, and his 30 knights, as well as the Red Knight, not Percival, and his 60 knights, and the Blue Knight and his 100 knights. He acquired these over his journey, where he ventured with Maiden Lynette, a woman who would constantly shit-talk her no matter what he did to impress her, until he managed to best her brother and won her sister in marriage. Her sister, Dame Lyonesse, gave him a magic ring that would increase her beauty, but it also makes Gareth unable to bleed, which seems useful I'd imagine. Even without this ring, he of course has bested Sir Kay, 6 thieves at once, 2 knights at once, and the Red Knight of the Red Lords. The Red Knight has the strength of 7 men, and every day up until noon his power increases. Gareth was even able to slice off a knight's head, and before the head could fall, cut it into 100 pieces. He has bested Sir Gawain, though later he could only stalemate Gawain, implying that Gawain grew in skill and strength to match him in a short time, and he was able to beat Palamedes and 16 random knights. Gareth is certainly fairly strong, easily the second strongest of his siblings just behind Gawain, who was able to stalemate him for 2 hours and then got even stronger after, while Gareth didn't. Speaking of Gawain though, Sir Gawain. Sir Gawain, also known as Gwalchmai, son of Gwyar, is the nephew of King Arthur, a hardy and courteous knight who did as good as he boasted and gave more as he promised, and also is absolutely hated by the people who wrote the Vulgate cycle and its derivatives. In early tellings, Gawain was a beloved, awesome, badass guy who was amongst the top of the Round Table, and I love him. He always had this Superman-esque aura, this guy who sure does make mistakes but does his best to correct them, and is seen as flawless because of the effort he puts in. In the Vulgate and onward stories, he varies from an asshole to a somewhat well-rounded character who I don't quite like as much. Though I will say, Sir Gawain is my favourite member of the Round Table other than Arthur himself. He is considered the Lord of the Knights, and is referred to as the Sun, in that the chivalry of others is enhanced by his presence the way the morning sun brightens all places that it shines. He is also the Prince of Wales, so he basically owns Biffweed. Gawain is consistently one of the noblest and kindest knights of the Round Table, Though he might not always be the best, he always tries the hardest, and is willing to sacrifice his own well-being for others even more than most knights. He even married the foul dame Ragnall. In doing so, he turned her from an ugly woman nobody could look at but him into a beautiful maiden finer than any. But he married her before she ever turned beautiful, willing to live his life with her ugly form regardless of how it made him look. Gawain has never gone on a mission where he failed, and frankly, he does not give a shit what people think about him. He is extremely loyal to his king, and even when considered a sinner, will still fight for his people. And they're good to have him, because Gawain is, to put it simply, armed to the fucking teeth. Gawain has no less than 4 magical swords at his disposal. King Arthur? He has 3, and one of those he shares with Gawain. Gawain's swords are the following. He has wielded Excalibur. More information on that sword's abilities can be seen in Arthur's video, but suffice to say, I can understand not choosing to give this one to him. Otherwise, he has the sword of King Gurgalain. This is the richest of all swords, and the very one that beheaded St. John the Baptist. The scabbard is loaded with precious stones, mountings made of silk with buttons of gold, and the pommel is made from a holy sacred stone of Emperor Enax. On the hour of noon, the sword comes out bloody and bleeding, but before that it will be green. Another of his swords is Gareth, a blade that he uses to completely cut a man in 2 pieces from head down to crotch despite wearing full armor in a single swing. And not just a man, he also used it to cut a fucking shield in half. Yeah, a piece of equipment that nullifies swords in real life? Yeah, Gareth cut it in half because Gawain got a bit annoyed. In Le Morte d'Arthur, he wields a similar yet different sword named Galatine, with which he one-shot Sir Bors and cut through a knight so viciously that he carved through the knight's shield, hauberk, chainmail and body with one blow, so hard that he could see the lung and liver. Holy fuck. This man does not let up with those last 2 swords. And he doesn't just have swords, he also has his famously loyal horse Gringolet, as well as a hauberk strong enough that mortal blows that would be able to kill him are rendered inert against it, a magic belt that doesn't actually do anything, and a shield decked in green with gold griffins, which withstood a hail of arrows from 500 bows and crossbows firing at him repeatedly. But even without his weapons, Gawain is so physically strong that he can slap you so hard you go flying a spear's length, and you would fail to get up 9 times in a row because of how badly dazed you would be. And when enraged, as I said, he could cut through a shield and armor, which has happened multiple times. His funniest feat of strength, however, appears in the Turk and Sir Gawain, wherein he plays fucking tennis with a ball of brass that no man in England could carry. But Gawain could play tennis with it. And he fucking wins. What was the racket even? What probably helped with that was the fact that he's not good at dying. He's managed to continue fighting after being hit on the helmet so hard that his helmet was literally glowing red as if it was just in a furnace. For his helmet to be glowing red, it would have had to be upwards of 460 degrees Celsius or 900 degrees Fahrenheit. That was on his head and he was able to just continue fighting. If that wasn't enough, Gawain at one point lost all of the blood in his body. As in, there was not a drop of blood left in his body. And do you know what he did not long after that? Well, if you thought he died, then you're a fool, because actually he got surrounded and then was able to hit so hard he shattered shields, tore chainmail, and freed himself from the melee. And none of that was accomplished with his power of noon. What I mean by that is that Sir Gawain's strength increases 3-fold at noon. While normally Gawain is very powerful, this power boost actually allows him to surpass even Lancelot's strength. However, it only lasts for 3 hours until Eversong, and it increases both his wind and evil wit. Of course, you might be wondering how strong he is normally compared to Lancelot, if a 3 times multiplier makes him so much stronger that it was a marvel that Lancelot was able to withstand at all. Well, Gawain's power varies. Outside of the Vulgate, Post-Vulgate, and Le Morte d'Arthur, every other telling of Sir Gawain puts him as an equivalent or superior to Lancelot, above the likes of Percival and other high-ranking knights. Gawain was able to fight demonic firebrands alongside Arthur and Lancelot as mentioned in the Arthur video. He is considered Lancelot's equal and Percival's superior in Morien. He is stated to have no superior in the way of the sword in Cleas, and in fact is the only knight that is able to match Cleas in that story, as Cleas was able to clean up both Lancelot and Percival with ease. He was able to match blows with Lancelot multiple times at the end of Le Morte d'Arthur, despite that story portraying him as lesser, and he was so powerful that no knight on Lancelot's side could defeat him across the 180 plus days that Gawain stood there before Lancelot's castle. The knights on Lancelot's side would include Sir Palamedes, someone who is comparable to Lancelot and Tristan. Eric and Enid outright states that Sir Gawain is ranked highest amongst the knights, followed by Sir Eric and then Lancelot. And it's not just statements. Gawain is a protagonist of multiple stories, including the story of the Carl of Carile, De Crone, Waiting on Gawain, The Orn Tears of Arthur. He shares the protagonist role with Percival, the unfinished Percival Knight of the Grail, and he plays a major role in the story of Ywain, Knight of the Lion. And in all his time as one of the most peerless and unmatched of the knights, he has bested incredible foes. He fought his equal Gawain for so long that day turned to night. He once defeated a knight on a horse while he was stuck on a mule of which is described as stupid, slow-footed, with a spindly neck and huge head, feeble and scrawny, with a bony spine and spurs that could barely even support itself. And while riding that thing, he bested another knight in a joust. After being shot by many arrows, fired from 500 bows and crossbows, he was still able to slice the paws off an attacking lion, as well as his head, in a single swing. He was able to kill a giant, warred against serpents, wolves, cliff savages, bulls, bears, boars, and giants, and killed all of them. In one tournament day, he defeated 40 knights, and he left before the day was even over. With a squad of only 140 knights, he was able to take on Mordred's 60,000, and in this situation, he frenzied like a berserker, rushing headlong like a lion and reached Mordred, nearly killing him in a literative morte Arthur. In fact, he would have killed him, but unfortunately Mordred managed to get lucky and killed him instead. But that was after Gawain had defeated an entire battalion all on his own, along with 10,000 Saracens alongside his knights. Another equal to him, Sir Gareth, fought against him for 2 hours straight in the Morte d'Arthur. He was able to kill Sir Lionel in a single blow, and bested and nearly killed Sir Bors on different occasions. In Waiting on Gawain, he apparently killed the devil himself, and in De Crone, he allegedly won the Holy Grail by himself, a feat even Galahad couldn't achieve. But I couldn't actually find either of those stories online, and I don't know where I could find them, so I can't read them to be sure what context there is for those feats, so take them with a grain of salt. And at last, one random thing, Gawain after dying even came back to Arthur as a ghost. Somehow. Oh yeah, I guess I also forgot, Gawain is a healer. Yes, he is the foremost master of leechcraft in Arthurian canon, which is a thing that totally works in real life. But not just leechcraft, he also knows of herbs that can ease pain, and in fact herbs that can cause nearly but not quite dead trees to regrow their roots. He was so good that none of his patients ever died, including Morien, who was in a condition where he had over 10 wounds, each of which were basically fatal, to the point where literally his entire horse, clothes, and weapons were dyed red. Gawain helped him with a root in his pocket that stayed the flow of blood and healed the feeble, and Morien, after eating just a bit of it, was able to move around, eat, drink, and somewhat ease his pain, despite having just suffered over 10 fatal blows. Gawain is just that good at healing, and he carries these herbs in his pocket. With all that said, I hope people who have only read Le Morte d'Arthur and know Gawain as somewhat of a coward who can only succeed with his noon boost, come to understand that Gawain is far more than that. Gawain is one of the strongest knights of the Round Table. He is consistently equal to Lancelot even without his power boost, and superior to the likes of Tristan, Palamedes, and Percival. Even his equals like Gareth and Ywain are only equal to Gawain normally, and not equal to how powerful Gawain comes by noon. I genuinely believe that not a single knight aside from possibly Galahad is a match for Gawain at noon. If you gave the Gawain of any story other than Le Morte d'Arthur a power boost like that, Lancelot's gonna really struggle to beat him, because you turn someone equal to Lancelot into someone 3 times as powerful. Gawain is genuinely extremely strong, and definitely ranks as one of the most badass and awesome knights of the Round Table, as well as one of their strongest, noblest, and wisest. And I should mention, he could possibly wield the Lance of Longinus. But I didn't mention it because the story of Percival was never finished, and I don't feel like looking at a bunch of unrelated people's attempts to end it. Gawain's journey to get the bleeding tip lance was never completed by its author, but here's my personal interpretation. I mentioned before that Gawain never failed a mission, right? To me, his journey to get the bloody tip lance in Percival was one that he had to fail, and in failing it would be a success. Gawain's journey was to learn that he cannot succeed every time, to humble him and keep him safe from pride. Gawain never acquired that spear, and that's why it's not mentioned in any other story. He failed that quest, but in doing so, he in a way succeeded. He learned that you can't always win, and that was humbling. And I like that, because it sends a good message, it makes me feel better about my own inadequacies. Sir Gigling. Right after Gawain is his son, Sir Gigling, also known as Libius Tosconus and Bufus. I actually do not remember his story well, and honestly I didn't enjoy it enough to want to reread it for the video. Just accept that he's Gawain's son, and that he's strong enough to hit a man on the head so hard that fire spurts out from his helmet. And not just that, but a sword breaks on impact against him. He defeated 3 knights at once and killed a giant who wielded a tree and a boar as weapons. I just wanted to mention him for the fire and giant thing. Sir Kay, otherwise known as Sir Kay, spelled differently, Sir Kai and Sir Caius. Sir Kay is the older foster brother of King Arthur, and is basically 2 completely different characters. The original Welsh Kay from the 6th to 12th century is a badass giga-chad superhuman blessed by his parents and God, considered one of the strongest knights of the Round Table. The modern, more well-known French Sir Kay from everything 12th century onwards is a gigantic arsehole who constantly talks about how good he is, loses at everything, and is essentially the medieval equivalent to Yamcha but without the part where anyone likes him. What has remained consistent in all stories, except Percival, is the undying loyalty of Sir Kay. He is considered one of Arthur's oldest companions from the very beginning alongside Sir Bedivere, and is someone who will stand by Arthur, the only person he will not relentlessly shit-talk. Though in Coleridge and Olwen he does abandon Arthur after Arthur turns basically his greatest achievement into a mocking song. Sir Kay is extremely powerful compared to the normal person. While he became something of a punching bag to the other knights of the Round Table, by the time of Arthur drawing his sword he was made the Knight of All Hallowmass, and he was trained from a young age by Arthur's foster father Sir Ector to be a knight. Sir Kay's armament's not that exciting. Though he normally only has normal swords, in Coleridge and Olwen he claimed the Sword of Wernachgor, a giant. So theoretically, Sir Kay should have just a giant sword. He also rides the hearse Gwynw God with Hir, and has a swift and powerful but unnamed blood-red warhorse gifted to him by Sir Carile. But where Kay excels is his supernatural abilities, one of the few knights with genuine, unambiguous superpowers. Kay was blessed by his father in Welsh tellings, known by the name Sinil Kinfarchog. This blessing was so that Kay's heart would always be cold. No heat would be in his hands, he would be tenacious and carry a burden, but also would suffer water and fire better than any individual, and no retainer or steward would be like him. This doesn't really mean much on its own, but it does explain his ridiculous strength. Sir Kay is directly stated by Arthur to have the strength of 100 men, and can casually cut down 3 men in one swing. In Coleridge and Olwen, he even decapitated a giant with 1 blow from his sword. And in Arthur's mind, unless God himself chose it, he doesn't think Kay could be killed. This would imply at least that the Welsh incarnation of Sir Kay is on similar power or higher than King Arthur, aided of course by his powers. Sir Kay is able to change his size so that he becomes as tall as the highest tree in a forest, and is able to act as a fire for his companions, by being so hot that even in the heaviest rainstorm, a handbreadth above and below him would be completely dry. As said last video, this means Sir Kay is producing more energy in his body by standing there than any human could produce with their strongest punch, and that's before Kay even grows giant. His other power is that he can go 9 days and 9 nights without sleeping, which is pretty incredible given he did this while also doing a bunch of other stuff. Kay has been capable of killing the monster cat Cath Palug, who alone killed 190 men. According to Arthur, an entire army would be insufficient to put Kay down, and he has been able to withstand the strongest winds in the world hitting him while on a boat like Bedivere. In one attack, with only 2 knights helping him, Kay was able to kill 500 knights, and has alone killed 9 witches. And to add in how unstoppable Kay is, while Kay normally survives most Arthurian legends, in every telling of the Roman invasion episode other than the Vulgate and Le Morte d'Arthur ones, he does die. But only a Literative Morte Arthur goes into great detail. In this story, he was attacked by surprise and disemboweled. Fuck, what did he do then? Well, he turned around, talked shit to the man who killed him, and then cut him in half. All while his innards and bowels were spilling out and he knew for a fact he was about to die. At his best, Sir Kay is one of the most metal characters in Arthurian legend, but unfortunately not a particularly highly ranking one in later years. For random tidbits, he owns the province of Anjou in France, he does not condone simpage, and he's both a sewer and a chef. A chef good enough to make the food on Arthur's Ascension Day. And finally, after his death, he was buried in a crystal chest within Caen in northwestern France. Sir Lancelot. Here it is, another one of the big ones. Sir Lancelot, the one that everyone knows, the embodiment to many of the perfect knight who does everything right and is the best and all of that. Lancelot definitely has had a journey, and I will say that not having the Vulgate and post-Vulgate cycles hurts the most for him, but all I think I've lost most is his backstory, and the fact that he gets angry sometimes. Lancelot du Lac was raised by the Lady of the Lake Guinevere, wherein years of his life and training passed by in farthest time outside of Avalon. He's often attested to have been raised alongside Sir Bors de Gaul and Sir Lionel. To get a few things out of the way, Lancelot is far from perfect. This man is a spectacular fuck-up. Aside from the well-known fact that he fucked Arthur's wife that basically led to everyone he knew and loved dying, he's also a massive simp, he can't climb for shit, like an idiot who burst open his own wounds, he got shot in the arse by a random huntress, which, I'll say this now, I have no idea why that this huntress is so deeply described. Like, it goes into major detail about her, and then she never shows up again. He was tricked into stripping down completely to climb a tree and grab a bird with his bare hand. Somehow he fell for that, and like seconds after Gawain gave him a tall and strong horse, Gawain found that horse had ended up dying. Like, he followed Lancelot 3 seconds after and the horse was already dead. Good job, Lancelot. He's also not some fan fiction character shoved into Arthurian legend after the original stories, at least not any more than a lot of the characters. Lancelot debuted in the 12th century, the same time as Percival, Galahad, Ywain almost. It's tricky with Ywain, but the modern version of Ywain, and a lot of other stables. If you only consider figures from prior to that not fan fiction, you'd only have Arthur, Gawain, Kay, Bedivere, Merlin, and Mordred. The rest would just also be fanfiction, so why is Lancelot targeted? Like I said, he's not even the most perfect one of his stories. Anyway, enough rambling about people unfairly judging Lancelot. Everyone wants to know just how stacked Lancelot is, so let's start with his arsenal. Lancelot has a sword that apparently is named Circe or Sequence in the Vulgate cycle, which was able to cut the hide of the beast, who is the devil, and cut a giant in full armor from shoulder to navel. You might be wondering if he has a sword called Arundite, and the answer is no. That was invented in the romance Sir Bevis of Hampton. And that's it. This does not feature in any actual story related to Lancelot. Lancelot also has a shield of gold with a lion on it, and a shield of sable with a queen and knight on it. He also has a shirt made of prickly hair, which prevents him from falling into sin. He additionally has a pair of great spears, of which a single one can kill 16 knights, and a magic ring. Lancelot's magic ring allows him to see through enchantments, reveal illusions, and even keep him from dying when inflicted by a lethal poison. Lancelot also has a sword and a cloth that he acquired from the Chapel Perilous. With the sword belonging to Sir Gilbert, he completely healed Sir Meliot instantaneously. And Meliot was at the point of death. One tap revived him. And Lancelot never used this sword and cloth again, so you know why I call him a massive fucker. Not that I say it to his face, because Lancelot's strength can be summed up as stupid. Lancelot alone can lift a tomb that requires 7 men to lift, and not just that, he lifted easier than 10 men could have. With his bare hands, he bent open iron prison bars, ripped prison bars out of walls, and broke chains imprisoning him. Lancelot has decapitated a man so hard that his head flew 7 feet straight up into the air, caused an entire pillar to quake just from yanking something out of it, and once killed a man by hitting him in the helmet so hard he instantly died. Now, compared to what other knights have done that are very similar, this might not seem impressive. The context is that Lancelot was completely naked, and explicitly was told that Bedivere had no weapons to give him. So he punched a knight in the helmet, and that instantly killed the guy. This isn't even the only time Lancelot killed a knight while he was naked. Lancelot once used a piece of dead tree to kill a fully armored knight while naked. And he just has a great record against knights in general. Lancelot has defeated 6 knights at once, defeated Sir Meliot while suffering from wounds, one-shot a knight after not eating for several days, battled 4 horse knights without a horse of his own, took on 40 knights at once with not a single one coming out without a wound or being near death, took down a knight who was akin to a devil known as the Moor. He took down the devil itself, which I guess is not a knight, but I'm including it here anyway. He defeated 5 knights in one swing, and he bested Sir Turquine, who had defeated and captured 64 knights of the Round Table, including Kay and Lionel. He also defeated Gawain and Ywain. He was ranked above Percival and often compared equally to Gawain. He was able to match and equal both Percival and Tristan. He defeated 500 knights in 3 days, killed 13 other knights of the Round Table in one rampage, and later another 24, and in the biggest flex he could manage, Lancelot once defeated Sir Meliot with one arm tied behind his back, no armor on his left side, and nothing protecting his head. And he won. It goes without saying Lancelot is by far one of the greatest knights of the Round Table. His feats eclipse everyone aside from Gawain and Percival, and he has almost never lost. Across his entire history, Lancelot has lost a total of 3 times. Once against Galahad in the Vulgate, Post-Vulgate, and Le Morte d'Arthur tellings, once against Tristan in the Prose Tristan, and once against Cleas in Cleas. He has only ever been matched by the likes of Gawain, Tristan, and Percival, and has only ever lost to Galahad in stories that actually give Lancelot credit. It's easy to see why he's considered so good, because he is treated as one of the best knights of the Round Table. Just rarely is he ever considered the best. But one thing's for sure, this man's tough. tough as balls. Not only is he so noble that effects that would make him go mad are completely ineffective, supernatural effects, he once was, slept with a woman without giving her consent, and then she did it again, and that made him go mad, but let's not talk about that. He walked on a bridge made of swords sharper than scythes with his bare hands and feet, and he walked the whole 2 lance length with his bare hands, 2 lances being like 12 to 14 feet, and he was fine. He fought for hours against an equal and was fine. He took a blow to the head from Bors, Lionel, and Ector at once and was fine. And when he was chasing someone, the guy told his archers not to bother trying to shoot him because 30 of the finest archers wouldn't be able to stop him. Instead, they had to shoot his horse out. And honestly, there were other accomplishments I didn't even know how to fit. He fought demonic firebrands, as has been mentioned before. He could hear Guinevere and a king talking despite them being in a tower while he was on the ground far away. A flaming lance once fell on him when he slept, but it just grazed him, so he put out the fire, pulled the lance out, and just went back to sleep like an overconfident Giga-Chad. He led 10,000 knights to defeat 60,000 Roman soldiers. It stated that he can't be beaten without treason or enchantment, and... yeah, okay, I think that's everything. Yeah, I don't have much else to say. That's the rundown on Lancelot. He has accomplished a fuck ton. So much that not even condensing it down for the sake of making the video flow better ends up shortening it much. It's so much to talk about. I tried my best. It's difficult. This video is difficult to make. Sir Lanval. Lanval is hilarious to me because when I read the first version of his tale, I thought he wasn't even worth taking notes on. Later versions though? So Lanval is not a knight with much going on. He met a woman who was hot as shit. She said she'd love him as long as he didn't tell anyone about them. Guinevere tried to fuck him and he told her he had a girlfriend, and then his girlfriend vanished. Then he was taken prisoner because Guinevere lied and said that he shit-talked her, and then before being executed, his woman shows back up and saves the day. And honestly, he lacks feats, but here's what he has. He has a horse named Blanchard. He has a large broadsword with which he smited knights as easily as the morning sun dispenses dew. He defeated Sir Valentine, whoever the hell that is. But most importantly, Lanval is immortal. As in, he lives on the Isle of Avalon, willing to joust with anyone who arrives. He leaves the other world, which is Anduin, to fight those who arrive on Avalon to face him. I just want to mention him because he's immortal. Sir Mahhouse. Mahhouse is essentially Le Morte d'Arthur's stand-in for the giant that Tristan defeated in his own stories. And so he's not really that relevant, but he is a knight with some unique gear. He has a circlet of gold worth 1,000 basants, which he won in a tournament. He has a white shield that a bunch of women spat on. I'm actually not going to give you context, I think it's funnier that way. And he has an envenomed spear that can poison you in one blow. The poison takes over a month to kill you, but cannot be healed by anyone other than Isolde the Fair, and the other supernatural things we've seen so far like Gawain's roots, Lancelot's cloth, and Galahad's hands. That's all there is. He fought Tristan for half a day and is better than loser Morte d'Arthur Gawain, though this doesn't likely stay true to the end, because by the end Gawain's able to match Lancelot. Mahhouse unhorsed Ywain, he defeated 6 knights in their ducal line, and he took out a giant, so that's interesting. Sir Menw. Sir Menw isn't actually got much going on. I just wanted to mention him because he's one of my favourite kind of pointless knights. One with something unique going on. Sir Menw is one of the 3 enchanted knights of King Arthur, taught by his father Uther Pendragon in witchcraft, and one of the 3 main knights of Kulvich and Olwen's early segments. He possesses enough strength to throw a spear through a giant's chest at his back, this giant being so big it takes entire pitchforks to raise his eyelids, and he possesses the abilities of invisibility and shapeshifting, being able to turn multiple people invisible and take the form of a bird. He can also pacify others. There's not much to say, I just like Menw. Enchanted Knights are wicked, and he's easily the most developed of the 3. Sir Mordred. Sir Mordred, the bastard child of King Arthur, sometimes nephew, and known by the names Medrawd and Mordred as well. Mordred is either the son of Arthur's sister, or the son of Arthur's sister after Arthur fucked her without knowing she was his sister. Mordred is easily most famous for his betrayal of King Arthur. In the story of Le Morte d'Arthur as well as the Vulgate cycle, Mordred is considered a trusted knight at the Round Table and spends time alongside his relatives Gawain, Agravain and the like. And if wondering, by the way, Fate fans, why Agravain the Proud isn't getting his own segment, it's because he does fucking nothing ever, beyond getting a bit mad at Lancelot. Mordred in Alliterative Morte d'Arthur and the Historia Regum Britannia, however, is not given any significance until his betrayal. In all these stories, however, Mordred is given command of Camelot in Arthur's absence. In Alliterative Morte d'Arthur and the Historias, This was during Arthur's conquest of Rome, and in the Vulgate traditions, this is after Lancelot's betrayal and occurs during Arthur's witch hunt of the man. Honestly, Mordred just sucks. He just sucks. He was going to marry either his dad or uncle's wife, either way kind of incestuous depending on the I mean, it's incestuous no matter what. And he usually starts shit and Arthur has to kill him, and the worst part, a lot of people probably most likely think of Mordred one of two ways. Either similar to the Fate character, where he's this really powerful badass with anger issues, or in a Loki sort of way, where he's this brilliant schemer. Neither is true. Mordred is an absolute tool. His only successful plan came about because Gawain blundered his entire squad into Mordred's army, and his attempt to trick Arthur totally failed. Fucking does a disguise, and Arthur's like, yeah, that's Mordred, I know, he's wearing something else, but I know it's him. And in terms of power, he's not up to much. It is stated he slaughtered a lot of Arthur's men, but killing a bunch of regular no-name knights is not a feat at all in this continuity. And his only battles include those against Arthur and Gawain. Noteworthy battles, that is. In his battle against Gawain in Elite de Monte Arthur, Mordred gets overpowered and throttled like it's nothing, and lucks out to defeat Gawain, and he barely fights Arthur. Arthur basically just kills him, and then Mordred hits him in the side of the face before he dies. And even then, despite smashing Arthur's brain, Arthur kept going for a while after. Mordred died on the spot. The only saving grace Mordred has, and the only reason he was able to even kill Arthur, is his sword Clarence. Though little is said about it beyond it being a ceremonial sword used for the crowning of kings and other important things, and that it was once owned by Uther Pendragon and was taken from Arthur's armory, it was able to survive clashing against Gawain's Galahad, meaning it's at least strong enough to take blows from a sword that can shatter shields and armor. And I guess Mordred does have a feat of taking a heavy mace to the head and fighting back hard enough to kill a named knight, who has no feats and was noted as being handicapped by his age, but then he did it, and he killed a bunch of no-names after. Despite that though, honestly, Mordred was a major disappointment. However, we'll give credit to Elite de Monte Arthur. The concept of a regretful Mordred who really did love his cousin Gawain and everyone else and kind of regrets his choices is interesting. I wish more versions of Mordred were like this, but I can't find any. Mordred, you suck. Sir Morien. Sir Morien, on the other hand, is based. Morien is an African knight who came to the court of King Arthur to find his father, the brother of Percival, Aglavale. This happens just before the Grail quest. His story really just amounts to he showed up, looked for his dad, found him, and then they went home and lived happily ever after. Morien doesn't have much going on, but I wanted to highlight there is an African member of the Round Table, so racism wasn't invented yet in the time of King Arthur. Apparently, never would you hear a tale of a man smiting blows as fiercely as Sir Morien, so he is the fiercest of the Knights of the Round Table. He could even cut a thrown spear out of the air, and he survived that thing I mentioned earlier with Gawain, being wounded and bleeding so badly that his entire horse was dyed red, with more than 10 wounds of which the least was fatal. And he survived. Of course that was with Gawain's treatment, but he was able to survive long enough to even get to Gawain. Morien is pretty strong, but sadly, even though he's really strong, he does lack experience and there's not much to talk about. Sir Priamus. Sir Priamus was an enemy of the Round Table who, after a fight with Gawain, was christened by Arthur and made into a Knight of the Round Table. Sir Priamus is most notable for his arsenal. He wields a sword that creates a wound that will bleed forever until its victim dies and cannot be healed, and with that he was able to fight equally against Sir Gawain. But even with that, he actually can heal it, because he has a vial containing the 4 waters of paradise which can heal any wound within an hour. The wounds here being Gawain being cut by Priamus' sword and bleeding until he dies, except it gets healed, and Gawain cutting Priamus so badly that his lungs and liver were exposed. Yeah, a bit of water fixed that. Sir Percival. No knight had a bigger glow up to me than Sir Percival, though at the same time no knight had as bad a start to me as Sir Percival. But despite how awful his start might have been, I actually came to really like the idea of him and his character after a while. Percival is a Welshman. His mother never wanted him to learn what a knight is due to his older siblings having died in service as knights, but once he did, he immediately ran off to be a knight. Though he didn't know it, as a result of this act, his mother died of heartache. I want to say now, I like this. I like the idea of Percival being a knight who had so much potential, but in his hastiness he ended up failing because he left too quickly, too immaturely. But in his story, his first big act is to sexually harass a woman and kiss her all over without permission and steal her wedding ring. He also eats a bunch of her food and drinks her drink. He's also dopey. He will ask questions and then not pay attention to the answer and just not give a shit about what others say. He listens to a story of woe and doesn't care. He's an idiot. He can't even figure out how to do shit with his own equipment, and he randomly decided his own name. But he also trained once and was better than everyone else except Gawain, Eric, and Cleas. In stories after this though, Percival is markedly less of an asshole. He's not an idiot dumbass who is perfect, he is just a really skilled knight, but it's his immaturity that is his biggest downfall. He ran off immediately without thinking to be a knight, and when he encountered the Grail he didn't think to ask of it, which basically cost him his status as the chosen one and transferred it to Galahad. He even sits to the side of the perilous seat, which, you know, is fitting given he has some big balls. Percival has stood there and survived a pounding on all sides by 20 men, and was able to smash through a chain and hauberk with one swing of his sword. His sword being a blade that he was given as a boy. Written on its side are words detailing where it was forged and how it was a sword that was impossible to break. It is a massive and long blade, one of 3, that is giant yet somehow still perfectly balanced, though it is stated that the moment Percival draws it, it will break, and only the swordsmith who forged it can fix it. But it's also impossible to break, so who knows how that works. I think impossible to break is more likely, given it hasn't broken before. In fact, it even wields the flames of the Dragon Knight. In Percival's, the Knight of the Fiery Dragon is a knight who destroys castles and knights. A foot taller than any knight Percival has ever encountered, with a sword 3 times greater than anyone else's, a spear as heavy as is possible to carry, and a shield big enough to protect 2 people. Emblazoned on it is a dragon head that bites and breathes fire so hot that it can instantly kill a person. This knight battled Percival and lost. Percival won partially by using his sword and absorbing the fires of the Dragon Knight. This isn't brought up again, but it's not stated like it's temporary, and let's not kid ourselves, a holy knight running around with a hellfire sword is badass. This sword was able to kill the Dragon Knight, and frankly I just sort of picture his sword was always flaming. It kind of, you know, matches the whole holy theme, flaming sword, Michael the Archangel, you know. His sword isn't the only thing that's special though. For one thing, Percival is actually the Red Knight and wears red arms, but he also has a shield of argent and azure with a red cross on a band of gold. No knight other than him may use this shield, which sucks for them because it's strong enough to stop a blow from the previously mentioned Dragon Knight who killed most anyone else in one hit. His last 2 pieces of equipment are accessories, one of which is the circlet of gold. This is the actual crown of thorns that Jesus wore on the cross. The other is a magic ring, which is hard to really understand because the text is written in as Old English as possible, but basically it makes it so that hitting him is like hitting stone. But he didn't have this ring for most of his life, so most of his accomplishments happened without the ring. He has fought for half a day against an equal until each had 15 wounds and were bleeding so much that it was a marvel they stood. He killed the Knight of the Dragon, whose shield created a wail that resounded for 2 leagues. He killed an evil serpent, was able to aim a spear throw so that it went through the gap in a knight's helmet straight into his eye, and with basically no training was considered as good as a knight who has been winning tournaments and wars. He managed to defeat Palamedes, the best knight in the Holy Roman Empire, as well as of course Sir Kay. He also killed a fire-breathing serpent that was attacking a lion, bested Chaos the Red, the best knight in Logres. He was ranked just behind Gawain and Lancelot in Morien, and fought against Lancelot for 2 hours straight. But in all this, I avoid the most impressive ability Percival has. Percival is a holy knight, a paragon of purity and all that. So holy that the hellfire of the Dragon Knight could not touch him, and instead went back the way it came as if it were hit with wind. But he is also so holy that he's one of the 3 knights to have achieved the Holy Grail, alongside Galahad and Bors de Gaul as mentioned earlier. But he is the only knight able to literally pray and summon the Holy Grail to him at will. Remember all the abilities I said the Holy Grail had in Galahad's section? Technically they apply to Percival too. He can call upon the Grail for all that good healing shit. This helps put Percival above other knights. When I personally say he's superior to Gawain and Lancelot, it is hard to say, but having this amazing healing ability does help. Of course, he does have to go down and pray for the Grail to get it, and while it's likely he'd be protected in a similar way to Sir Bors was by divine intervention, if you don't know, there's a point in the story where Bors is being attacked and God strikes his opponent with lightning. That's probably what would happen with Percival too, so unless he's fighting someone of equal holiness, he's likely going to be protected in that way. Still, Percival is an amazing knight. He's extremely powerful and honestly a likable character once we get past his original unfinished story. Sir Tristan. Sir Tristan is fascinating. Also known as Tristram and Tristan with a Y, he was once a completely unrelated character to Arthurian legend. Tristan was part of his own entirely separate romance, Tristan and Isolde, but as time went on, Tristan went from unrelated to somewhat mentioned in various stories, to having his time with Arthur being a part of his story, to being one of the most major characters in the most well-known medieval work of King Arthur, Le Morte d'Arthur. Tristan's backstory is easily one of the most fleshed out of all the knights, seeing as he has an entire romance dedicated half to it. He is the child of sadness, named Tristan due to the terrible circumstances of his birth, and raised an orphan because his mum died. Tristan was a loyal knight of King Mark, his uncle, When King Mark didn't want a lover, but was pestered into it, he said he would take one if it was a maiden to which a golden lock of hair he found owned. Basically, he wanted a girl nobody could find. As it turns out, this hair belonged to a woman that Tristan had met, because prior, Tristan fought a knight and won, but was poisoned and had to travel to seek the giant's sister. He won her hand by killing a dragon and brought her to Mark, but while doing so, the two accidentally drank a love potion together, and thus came tragedy. Tristan and the woman, known as Isolde, had to cast a spell on Mark that would trick him into thinking he was making love to Isolde every night, but in fact he wasn't. Their forbidden romance went on until Mark learnt the truth, whereupon he set out to take Tristan's life. Then there comes two versions, the classic noble King Mark tradition, and the revamped asshole King Mark tradition. I prefer the classic version as it adds more tragedy and more depth to the character. In the classic tale, Mark intends to kill the two, but they escape. When he finds him in his blind conquest, he sees that Tristan is sleeping with her, but there's a naked sword between them. Back in those days, a sword between two people meant that they are abstaining from sexual intercourse, meaning that Tristan never actually fucked her. Seeing this as a sign that Tristan actually regretted all this and wanted to remain loyal to his uncle still, Mark entered their house and changed the sword between them to his own, essentially offering a form of peace. An agreement was made and Isolde returned to live with Mark while Tristan left in exile elsewhere. This is usually where the story of Tristan joining Arthur comes in. Usually, after this point, he leaves and then he comes across the Knights of the Round Table and become part of them. Sometimes, Tristan and Isolde would communicate through long distance messages, but eventually it ended in tragedy. Tristan was poisoned and only Isolde could help him. Tristan held on as long as he could, but eventually, just as he heard that Isolde's ship was spotted approaching the shoreline, the poison claimed his life. Isolde cried her heart out, lay beside the man she truly loved, and never woke up again. A tragic tale where nobody is truly the villain, but the circumstances and conflicts of loyalty ruined everyone. The revamped version, Mark is just an asshole and the most evil cunt ever, so let's talk about Tristan. Tristan ought to be most well known to Fate fans as an archer, but he is actually the most skilled sword fighter in all of Arthurian legend. Well, one of them at least. His sword possesses a chip in it, gained from when he killed a giant, but he also possesses the sword of King Mark, which is just a second sword. And he has a shield fashioned by Morgan Le Fay as a gift, with paintings to represent Arthur, Guinevere and Lancelot and their cursed love triangle. From a young age, Tristan learnt the skills of chivalry, foreign language, music, horsemanship, athletics, vague tournament skills and courtly pastimes to the point of surpassing his own tutors. There is even an entire book about the art of venery, hawking and hunting, named the Book of Tristan, after him. He is a skilled harpist, as well as player of the fiddle and lyre from the age of 14. So good that even near death, he is taken straight to the Queen of a Nation because of how good he was. He is a master of the sword and the lance. He is able to call birds and apparently all winged things to him, and it's stated that one of his peculiarities is that whoever drew blood upon him died, and whoever Tristan drew blood upon also died. I don't know what this means, so I'm going to ignore it. Tristan, of course, is a skilled marksman, and has a bow by the name of Failnaught that, while lacking any feats, is stated to be able to strike home whatever it shot, which could make it mystical. Tristan is strong enough to break chains that would imprison him, tough enough to walk out unharmed from fire, deadly enough to kill his horse where it stood, and, as I mentioned in the previous video, very fast. Fast enough to catch fire, and deliver 20 blows for every one blow another knight would give him. Above it all though, Tristan is foremost master at killing giants. He had beaten a giant with the strength of 4 men known as Morold, killed the giant Urugan, and killed the giant Taulus, described as the most formidable giant in all of England by using a pine tree as a weapon and killing him with his own sword, and at one point he killed half a score of saucy giants, that being 10 giants, all on his own in a single battle. Not just satisfied with giants, Tristan has killed 3 knights at once. Like, not okay with that? Okay, how about the time he killed 30 knights at once? That better for you? As well as a dragon. Said dragon described as possessing the head of a bear, a griffin's body, a serpent tail, lion claws, and the ability to breathe fire that killed his horse. Most famously, Tristan is well known for the Morte d'Arthur, wherein he was able to defeat King Arthur, though with some trouble. He also defeated Sir Bedivere, was ranked above Gawain, though most people are, took down Gareth and Palamedes, fought Lancelot while suffering a near-death wound, and finally battled against Lancelot for 4 total hours. In a single night, Tristan has killed 100 knights, and while naked took another knight's sword, killed 10 knights, and then escaped the rest of them, of which there were 40. Tristan is easily one of the greatest knights of the Round Table, though his placement amongst them is somewhat unclear. While in the Morte d'Arthur he is easily among the same tier as Lancelot and Palamedes and superior to Gawain, outside of those he's not really compared as one of the greatest knights. I would certainly say that he is a match for Lancelot, and probably on par with other knights of the same caliber, like Percival and Gawain. I personally think that most of them could defeat him, though. But hey, if you only use Le Morte d'Arthur, Tristan is definitely better than him. Regardless, Tristan without a doubt stands as one of the greatest knights, even if he is something of a total fuck-up sometimes. And finally, the last knight we have to talk about, Sir Ywain. Sir Ywain, also known as Sir Ywain, Sir Yvain, and Sir Owain, and also Ywain de Blanchimans, is the son of King Arthur's sister Morgan Le Fay and her husband King Urien. Or Urien. King Urien, I think, is as may be pronounced. He is the main protagonist of the story Ywain Knight of the Lion, one of the 5 romances written by Chrétien de Troyes. Within this story, he goes to avenge his cousin who gets his ass kicked by a magic knight. He does that, then marries that knight's wife, and then simps super hard. He agrees not to stay away too long, then he goes away and stays away too long, and he goes crazy until his mind is healed by an ointment made by his own mother. After this, he travels around Britain doing good deeds until he is worthy to return to his wife, which he does, happy ending to all. That's basically the story, and within that story, Ywain gets his name for a lion he saved who became his loyal companion. Yeah, Sir Ywain most famously is accompanied by a goddamn lion. During his journey, after having his sanity restored, Ywain came across a venomous, fire-breathing serpent attacking a lion, which he cut in half. The serpent, not the lion. And then he kept cutting it into tiny bits. After this, the lion remained loyal to Ywain, and is stated to want to do his every wish. The lion has killed deer for Ywain and itself to eat, stayed on watch for him while he was sleeping, and was smart enough to escape a locked room. Ywain even returns his loyalty, refusing to leave the lion outside when he's told he cannot be allowed into a place with it. Hell, when the lion thought Ywain was dead, he set up Ywain's own sword so that he could fucking kill himself on it, which is... wow. Most notably, however, during one of Ywain's battles against a pair of giants, the lion was able to come in and really fuck one up, allowing Ywain to win. Not to say Ywain is worthless without the lion, however. Ywain doesn't have many supernatural powers, but he is noted as being superior to Roland from the Matter of France, and was lucky enough to be able to make it through a supernatural storm without being struck by lightning even when his cousin was. He also has 2 magic rings. The first of this ring makes it so that nobody can see him any more than wood covered by outside bark, so long as the ring is facing inwards towards his palm. The second of these rings prevents Ywain from being harmed so long as he is a loyal and true lover, making his body as hard as iron and unable to lose any blood. However, this ring is deactivated soon after he gets it because he goes against his queen's wishes and stays away too long. So Ywain actually accomplishes most of his feats without the ring, but once he's back with her, he should be able to have it at its best. Along with those, he has a few more animals on his side beyond his lion. He has his horse, Carnwalag, as well as a gerfalcon and another horse adorned by gold that he won in a tournament. Speaking of his accomplished feats though, Ywain is strong enough to hit a knight so hard that his helmet is crushed and his head split to the brain. He hit Kay so hard he somersaulted from his horse, and hit another knight so hard he fell over. Oh, also his heart exploded and his back broke. Ywain is fast enough to cut down 4 knights faster than you can count to 4, he is tough enough to take an onslaught of blows so nasty his helmet breaks, and his shield shatters like ice so there are fist-sized holes in it, and he just keeps taking blows from these giants without his magic ring to defend him. Then the lion comes in and saves him, and of course they killed those giants. Ywain has managed to defeat Sir Escaldos, the greatest knight in that area at the time, killed a giant so large that when it fell the sound was equivalent to a falling oak tree, fought against 3 knights at the same time and won with his lion, and with his lion he killed 2 giants who are described as sons of the devil, wielding cherry trees covered in copper and wound in brass as clubs. His skill is so great that no knight in Cornwall could match him, though Tristan wasn't there at the time, and he was able to match against Sir Gawain evenly, Sir Gawain being his brother and closest friend. He is a hardy motherfucker too, he fought from day to night. He does have one major flaw though. He's a massive simp for his wife, the biggest simp. She tells him to beg not to die and he will beg for her like a dog. But even with that, I'll give you one little tidbit, this quote. "But such persons may probably be rated as fools for thinking that a lady is in love with them just because she is courteous and speaks to some unfortunate fellow and makes him happy and caresses him." And bonus round, here are some knights who I didn't feel like dedicating a segment to. Sir Agravain the Proud accomplished nothing. Sir Bors de Gaulle defeated Priadan Lenoir, and also defeated Sir Bedivere after being stabbed in the shoulder, then killed a lion. He once did best King Arthur, but Arthur got back up and drew his sword, meaning that he probably was going to be in trouble if Arthur decided to attack back. And he wields a broken sword repaired by Galahad that was used to strike Joseph through the thigh. Sir Palamedes has a lot of chapter time, I guess you'd say it, in the exactly book version of screen time, I don't know. But all it amounts to is a bunch of times he fights Tristan and he loses. Sir Peleus defeated all of the Round Table, though at this point the best was a young Sir Gawain who just started, so it's not much. Sir Ironside is the Knight of the Red Lords mentioned in Gareth's segment. He joined the Round Table after being bested. Sir Brenoir Lenoir, also known as the Cote Maletale, is a young but bigly made knight who was given the castle of Pendragon. He killed a lion, fought 100 knights and survived while killing 12, and fought for 2 hours straight. I can't really include him in the ranking of knights because he has so little going on despite having whole chapters devoted to him. Sir Lamorak de Galus is the son of King Pellinor. He was a match for Sir Ironside, better than 500 knights in one tournament, and beat a wounded Palamedes, but that's about it. Sir Gaheris is kinda just there. He's a rival to Agravain sometimes, but the most important thing he does is kill his own mother Morgause for being an unfaithful wife to his father, and then he died, which motivated Gawain. Sir Dagonet is Arthur's court fool. That's all. And wow, that's all the knights. It only took this has got to be nearly an hour, right? I don't know, I haven't edited yet. Over 20 pages of script, over 100 pages of notes. But now that that's done, let's ask the question. How do the knights compare to each other? Well, there's 2 ways I can think of to do this. One is to assign points, I guess, or just talk about how they rank in each different, I guess, telling and interpretation, and the other is my opinion. Let's do the former first. The tellings where they're ranked, ignoring Arthur, are the following. Ancient Welsh. Sir Kay ranks the highest, and below him is Sir Bedivere, and below him is what would one day become Sir Gawain. Historia Regum Britanniae, and variants such as Brut and Alliterative Morte Arthur. Sir Gawain is ranked the highest, followed by Sir Kay, then Sir Bedivere. The Romances of Chrétien de Troyes. Sir Gawain is ranked the highest, followed by Sir Eric and Sir Lancelot. However, Cleas bested Sir Lancelot, and Ywain equaled Gawain the longest. So I think it would actually turn out to be number 1, Gawain, number 2, Ywain, number 3, Eric, number 4, Cleas, number 5, Lancelot. The Vulgate cycles, including Le Morte d'Arthur. Sir Lancelot is the highest, not counting Galahad, followed by Tristan, then Percival. Prose Tristan. Tristan is ranked the highest, followed by Lancelot. Perlis Vals. Lancelot and Percival are joint highest, followed by Gawain. Morien. Lancelot and Gawain are both ranked as the highest together, followed by Percival. So in total, Sir Kay and Sir Tristan have both been considered the best once each. Lancelot has been ranked the best once alone, if you ignore Galahad, and once shared with Percival, and once shared with Gawain. And Gawain has been ranked the best alone twice, so Gawain tends to be ranked the highest the most, followed by Lancelot and then Percival and Tristan and Kay. If you include each variant of those stories as their own thing, Gawain would get a boost for each version of the Roman invasion episode unrelated to the Vulgate cycle, including Brut, Alliterative Morte Arthur, and Gesta Regum and Glorum. Lancelot will get one for each version of the Vulgate cycle, adding post-Vulgate and Le Morte d'Arthur. So overall, Gawain would still come out on top, followed by Lancelot, then Tristan, then Percival and the Welsh version of Kay. With Galahad obviously being above all of them because he's fucking Galahad. Though if Gawain really did win the Holy Grail on his own, I guess he could match that. So by that metric, Gawain is most consistently ranked the best, followed by Lancelot. But in my opinion, I'd say they would rank like this. Here are the knights that I cannot fairly compare to the other knights. The Welsh Sir Kay is incredibly strong and should get high, but we don't know much about how he'd compare to modern knights given his modern version sucks. Lanval, while immortal, lacks anything to say how he'd go in a fight not to the death. And both Bertlac and Carile should logically be super strong, but the best they have is statements and we can't say for sure how strong they really are. So in order of the significant knights, we have, at the bottom, Sir Kay. The French Sir Kay is beaten by fucking everyone. Ywain, Eric, Turquine, Percival, Carile, Peleus, Gareth, and Palamedes have all hammered Sir Kay. Lowest, he sucks. Just above Sir Kay is Sir Agravain, because I've never seen him do shit, but at least I haven't seen him eat so many L's. Just above Agravain is Sir Mordred. Mordred is a total fuck-up. He barely beat Gawain through sheer luck after Gawain had just fought through his entire army and multiple companies of knights. And other than that, he only killed Arthur after Arthur dropped his guard, and that's just because Clarent is a great sword. If Gawain wasn't tired and Arthur hadn't dropped his guard, Mordred would be screwed. Clarent does allow him to take down a lot of the knights above him, but I think he would lose in a fight against them. Sir Morien I'd put just above Mordred. Morien is very physically strong, but compared to the other also superhumanly strong knights, he lacks experience and training. I think he could hit as hard as some of the higher ups, but he's not besting them due to their skill. Just above him I'd put Sir Ironside. Ironside is also super strong like Morien, but he has more experience. Unfortunately, he also lacks appearances to back it up. Then there's Sir Mahhouse. He fought Tristan for a day, but I think all the above knights could do the same. Following Mahhouse is Sir Peleus, who defeated Mahhouse directly, then Sir Bors. Sir Bors is interesting because he was super skilled and did smite Arthur, but he didn't beat him. I consider him just below Arthur, similar to the one above him. Sir Bedivere, he doesn't get to do much after Welsh stories, but in them he's just below Arthur, so he's here. And given he's not treated as a joke like Kay, I can actually put his Welsh version on here. Then we have the knights who are the same caliber as Arthur. These are the ones who would all scale to the same level as Arthur in versus terms. The first one I would put down here is Sir Gareth, who was a match for Gawain for a while. Then Sir Ywain, who also matched Gawain, and well, you might be thinking, Gareth beat Gawain at one point, and Ywain didn't. Shouldn't Gareth be above him? Well, Ywain fought Gawain at his best, while Gareth clearly defeated a Gawain who was yet to reach his best. But Ywain also tends to be less impressive outside of his own story, so he can't get any higher. Unlike, and also kinda like, Sir Palamedes above him, who could match Tristan for a while but would also lose. Then there's Sir Priamus, who matched Gawain just like Ywain and Gareth, but the reason I place him above Palamedes and Ywain is his powerful sword, able to deliver wounds that cannot heal. I think they'd get the better of them, but those above Priamus are ones so skilled I think they could take him down with those wounds on them, and then just take the vial of healing he has and use it on themselves. Hell, some of them can heal themselves without his vial. Way above Priamus, I place Tristan. Tristan is extremely strong, one time considered the best and another time considered Lancelot's equal. However, outside of specifically those two stories, he is just not that impressive. I say where he really falls short is that he lacks the magical equipment the others tend to have. At best, his bow will never miss, but characters like Gawain and Lancelot at their strongest don't give a shit about some arrows. So while Tristan could easily match them and potentially even defeat them on occasion, I'd rank him the lowest of what I'm calling the Big Four. Unfortunately, just between him and the other three are two knights that I ranked above him, but I don't consider them in the Big Four because they only appear once each. Sir Cleas was able to defeat Lancelot and Percival, and he did so with ease, and he is even mentioned as surpassing Tristan, but he was matched by Gawain. Just above Cleas I put Berac, who is probably on the same level of skill and strength as him, but he never seems to stop fighting to die, so I think in a fight between Berac and Cleas, he just outlasts Cleas. Then there's the other members of who I call the Big Four. Gawain, Lancelot, Percival. So who do I rank third amongst those three? Personally, Percival. Percival has never been considered alone the best amongst the knights as mentioned. I guess you could say the same for Lancelot, but that's only if you include Galahad, who we are excluding. But he is also extremely powerful, as we have seen. In any story involving him, aside from the original romances that he was written in, he is often ranked third or even second best. He is someone equal to or just below Lancelot, a paragon who wields a flaming hellfire sword that never breaks and a holy shield. Where Percival might be able to get the better of those two though, is that he has the ability to pray for the Holy Grail, but I'd say more often than not they'd beat Percival before he can do that. Then there's the last two, and honestly between them, it's hard to make a choice, but I would give the tiniest, and I do mean tiniest of edges, to Gawain. Gawain's equipment is insane, and definitely better than Lancelot's, as are his abilities, with his strength multiplying basically allowing him to overcome Lancelot. Though the only time they ever directly fought was Gawain losing, that required Lancelot to weather his attacks for 3 hours, which I'd say he'd struggle to do if this was a Gawain from any other story. He struggled to weather those attacks against a Gawain who was considered weaker than him. A Gawain stronger than him or equal to him, like any other version, he would have trouble standing up against. That's not to say Lancelot doesn't have advantages. Lancelot is likely more skilled, having had more training, and his healing sword is certainly better than Gawain's healing herbs, as Lancelot will never run out unless that sword is destroyed. He also is probably harder to put down, because he just never gives up. I mean, neither does Gawain, but Lancelot has better feats of endurance. But what I think seals it in Gawain's favour, to me, he possesses the Holy Grail, allowing him a ton of healing that Lancelot can't answer. And that definitely makes me fully lean towards him. But without the Grail, I still think a full power composited Gawain is so on par with a full power composited Lancelot that it's a toss up. Either winning I can see an argument for, but with the Grail and Dicrone, Gawain wins. But I would still say that on average I would rank Gawain slightly above Lancelot. And then above them all by a wide margin is Galahad, the greatest knight, and it's not even close. At last, video is done. Wow. That was my video going over every major member of the Knights of the Round Table. And I had to re-record it once over because my computer froze while recording once. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be upset that Lancelot didn't take that coveted second place, but he was there for a while. I had to talk myself into how they compare and coming to be able to come to a conclusion between them. I just think Gawain takes it with his abilities and equipment. Still, the argument's there for Lancelot too. I hope this was informative and interesting to people the whole way through, but I also imagine people skipped around to their favourite knights, but hey, most people don't ever seem to acknowledge the supernatural elements of most of the knights, so maybe this video even taught you something about your favourite knights. That'll do for my King Arthur video trilogy. I'm done with that. I'll probably make a few more videos on Arthurian legend in the future, just not power scaling ones. For now though, that's it. I've got other big projects to work on, and maybe you'll see a video involving another mythological figure sometime in the future.